next guest started out actually as a practicing lawyer before going into stand-up comedy. Would you welcome Al Lubel?
One of the original Star Search winners, Al Lubel.
You remember Al Lubel?
Very well. I have an Al Lubel story.
Please welcome back the wacky, the odd Al Lubel. The wacky, the odd Al Lubel.
Al Lubel.
Al Lubel.
Al Lubel. Al Lubel. Al Lubel. Al Lubel. Al Lubel. Al Lubel. Al Lubel. Al Lubel. Al Lubel. Al Lubel. Al Lubel. Al Lubel. Al Lubel. Al Lubel. Al Lubel. Al Lubel. Al Lubel. Al Lubel. Al Lubel. Al Lubel. Al Lubel. Al Lubel. You know what's strange? The more I say my name, the more y'all look at me like, who is this guy?
I really liked this. I thought that I'm a fan of documentaries, so I've seen my fair share of them. I thought overall, as a documentary, it was structured really, really well. They had a good combination of interviews, and not just with the kind of object of the documentary, but also with other people that weren't necessarily just family members or friends. It was also people that had heard of or knew of Al within like the comedy community, which I thought added a great insight and depth to it that you don't always get when you only have interviews that are with friends and family or with the subject themselves. So I thought that it was a really nice blend of that. I also liked the progress of the story, that it did take place over time. You could tell that there was a lot of time invested into it, which you were able to like feel in different parts of the film. You were able to get it felt like a more honest read or honest snapshot of him and his process and kind of like different concepts that he's struggling with, because it wasn't rushed. It did obviously take place over time, but also you could see different examples of some of the things that he was talking about, or different examples of like the different types of shows that there are and the different types of struggles that can come along with it, and how changing or things happen and you just have to kind of go with them. I also loved that it didn't just focus on his comedy and his profession. It was about him as a person, and everything that kind of led him to being passionate about stand-up comedy.
Like mixing in clips of his jokes and like his stand-up comedy really works well with the commentary that we receive, because we get to see like him on and off stage, like the type of jokes that he makes and like how he is as a comedian versus how he is as a person. There's also like this whole other side of him that we get to see when he's with his mother, and I think that works well, because I think oftentimes with celebrities, like sometimes we forget like they're a lot like us, like they have family members, and they had lives before they were famous. So it really was nice being able to see all these different aspects of his life. And honestly, his comedy is hilarious. It was such a joy to watch, and he's a very like outgoing person with a huge personality, and I think that this film and documentary did a fantastic job capturing that.
A fascinating look at what I think is one of the most fascinating jobs in American employment, the life of the stand-up actor, who is on the cusp of fame and recognition, and makes appearances on Letterman and Leno, and has friends like Sarah Silverman, and has plenty of people, famous people, who will say very nice things about them, but is unable to really live on that and make a career of that. And this comedian, in this case, his name is Al Lubel, but it's very empathizing, because it could be so many other comedians out there working, and some of them are working to become the most famous personalities since Bill Cosby or Jerry Seinfeld or anybody who's made the greatest name for themselves in comedy. But some of them are just trying to earn a paycheck, and that is what I think Al Lubel is and is doing. The scenes of him in the middle where he's got the stumbling blocks of the demented mother, and he has to stay at the documentarian's house, his parents' house, just because he has no money, are certainly they're depressing in that you get the feeling of somebody who is not as financially successful as you hoped he would be, but they do offer a lot of introspective ideas on why he is who he thinks he is. He thinks he's entitled to genuine laziness because of his upbringing. He thinks he's incapable of doing things that other people call menial jobs. And that to me is fascinating. It's the life of the stand-up actor, and I think that this documentary, Mentally Al, captures it. I think Al Lubel is a fascinating character, not just because of his persona, but because his brand of weird comedy is exactly the kind of comedy that I find especially funny.
This is a really, really interesting watch. Al Lubel was not somebody who I was familiar with before this documentary, and I really enjoyed seeing these big name comics really just praising him and his talents and how completely underrated he is. He's a fascinating character who is absolutely walking the unbeaten path. He's his own character. He's marching to the beat of his own drum. He is truly like a unique person, and his comedy is unique, and I don't think that there is anyone else like him. And it's interesting what they say about comics. Usually the people who are the funniest often are the saddest or the most depressed. And, I think that he absolutely is a star, and, clearly the higher ups have deemed him so, but, he talks a lot about his fear of success. And I think that definitely plays a huge role in how successful you are, depending on how you define success, of course. But I think that if there's something that's held him back in life, it probably would be his fear of succeeding, which is what he did attest to in the documentary. So I really enjoyed this, learning about him and his life and his process as a comic, and just really getting to see the behind the scenes reality of being a working comic. This was fantastic, and I definitely am grateful for getting to watch his journey so far.
Is absolutely one of those celebrities that when you see him, you're like, oh my God, I know him, even if you might not be able to put a name to the face right away. And especially when you hear his comedy, you're like, yes, I definitely know him. I've definitely seen him before. And in this documentary about him, Mentally Al, we take a really close examination of what comprises a comedian. And what often surprises people is that very often what comprises a comedian is a very complicated life. For Al, it was particularly a complicated childhood, which was, I thought, very brave of him to talk about so earnestly his relationship with his mother and his feelings of dependency and how that ended up affecting him in the long term. And I think it makes us all reflect on, yes, our relationships with our parents, but also on our own ambitions and dreams in our lives. And are we doing all we can to make them come true? And are we trying to assure as best as we can that we will not hold regrets later? What I think is great about Al in his life and what we see of it in the documentary is that though he does have regrets, at least he's honest about them, right? He doesn't try to pretty it all up and, say, I'm so pleased with how things turned out and I'm perfect. No, he's very honest about it, and that there is still that tinge of hope for him, as he should have, because it ain't over till it's over, truly. And I thought it was great to see that attitude, that persistence. He's still going out there. He's still working hard. He's still making people laugh. Because at the end of the day, despite this individual especially having such a severe fear of death, he is not going to say it's over until, you know, the heart really skips that second beat, like he talks about at one point. So it's his determination, his perseverance, and his honesty, as well as his comedy, that I think make this documentary an examination of his life such a great success.
Never heard of Al Lubel before, but I was immediately intrigued. I loved all the found footage to show how he started to really, his rise to fame and that sort of movement towards that stardom that he was seeking, and then to see it kind of evolve into what his life is now. And there was such a passion for his craft that was very apparent, and he's just such an interesting character on his own. I love that it turned into a dissection of who this man is, and he is what he shows at all times. And you could tell that because all of his jokes, all of his camera monologues and talks completely reflected what both close family members, including his mom, his best friend from his youth would say about him, but also what all the comedians working in the industry would say about him. And it was just amazing to see such a star-studded cast talking so reverentially about his humor and showing that he is the star that he deserves to be. So I'm looking forward to seeing more what happens in his career.
My heart goes out to Al Lubel and the struggling artist, but I really admire him for pioneering his own path in the world of comedy. It's curious to me that even some of the household names in comedy can see that Al is funny, yet he continues to fly under the radar and has trouble getting bookings. I think that he did get some traction with the audience covering some really unique sets, and that's what I like about him, is that he's not standard, he's not like everybody else. The camera definitely captured all of the essential moments to create a clear picture of Alan on and off stage. I certainly liked my adventure through Al A. Pun intended. Al definitely did make me laugh. I could tell that he's well-read and very clever, especially how he interacted with the woman who was heckling him about the attempted murder jokes and how he manipulated her joke to his own benefit. Just perfect comedy.
Thoroughly enjoyed this one. The documentary itself on a technical level was absolutely well presented, edited and written by the documentary producer and written mostly by Al Lubel. I love that bit at the end there. Just obviously a really interesting character. The documentary takes its time, introduces you to them, you explore with them a little bit, like what kind of person this is, you get to know them, you really do feel like you get an idea of who the Al Lubel is and a glimpse into his life. And I mean, it's kind of tragic, it's kind of rewarding, it's all these different things that just really make this a really interesting documentary on a really interesting and funny guy. So it's absolutely worth checking out. It's called Mentally Al.